Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chair, three things that opening opposition will be proving to you today. Firstly, why keeping rehab solely as the means of releasing inmates is deeply flawed. Secondly, why it results in further criminal activity and deterioration within the society. And finally, the dangers of rehab as a means of release in the first place. Right? But before I move on to points of refutation, here's something that we would like to clear from the opening opposition. Expounding upon the benefits of rehab was never the main thing that was to be discussed in the debate in the first place. What we are really discussing is why rehab should or should not be the sole means of release within the system of a prison, and that is exactly what we're going to be proving to you in this debate, right? But moving on to their lines of argument, they have brought forward three main points to us. Firstly, they propose that the purpose of a justice system is to be fair and provide justice to the criminals. Therefore, rehab is the best way to go about it. Now, I will actually explain why this is not the case when I explain why solely keeping rehab is a flawed system. But secondly, right, jail time is bad enough already, and inmates who have committed all manners of heinous abuse and crimes actually don't deserve that kind of time. That kind of time in the jail is one of the most absurd things that I've ever heard in this debate so far. Here's the thing, right? Claiming that jail time is unnecessary and completely heartless and absurd claim to make because it's not like you are staying constrained within the confines and continue to manifest in your pathological desires. Jail time has a lot more than that. It has religious programs, it has educational programs, it has programs of social affiliation and so forth. So and the jail time is only allocated to you on the basis of the nature of the crime that you have committed. Therefore, we believe that it's perfectly justified, right? But then the last point being about how rehab makes you realize your wrongs. Here's what you need to prove to us as government bench as a whole. Prove to us why the inmate won't relapse after he has taken part in rehab, as happens with other forms of rehab in cases like drug abuse and alcohol abuse as well. But now moving on to my first point. Five lines that I'll be showing to you as to why the sole induction of rehab as a means of release is deeply flawed. Firstly, keeping rehab solely as a means of release is inconsistent with the fair system of justice that we believe in. Now, why is that? Rehab is mainly committed by professionals, teachers, and therapists who are by nature inherently biased against the criminals that they are dealing with, right? And what this ends up doing is it skews their perception of not only the crime that has been committed, but also of whether the criminal deserves to stay in jail or deserves to be free. Secondly, why rehab is flawed, right? What it does is it creates something that we call sentence disparity. What happens when you keep rehab as the sole means of release? The overall length of the inmate sentence actually gets tailored accordingly to the length of the rehab session as well. And what it ultimately does is it kind of completely cuts down on the overall length of the sentence as well, which we believe is the complete opposite of injustice and unfairness that they are trying to propose so far. Thirdly, right, what it does is when you focus on rehab as the sole means of release, you ignore other far better methods of bringing the criminal to a higher moral standing, or of actually rectifying his flaws in the first place. You see, where rehab is a get out of jail free card for an inmate, where he can not only manipulate the entire system and continue to relapse and continue to commit the flaws that he's already been committing in society, we propose that other better systems like linking up with religious affiliations within the jail, or getting them to take part in community service and so forth, are better ways of getting the person to actually realize his flaws and to actually make a more positive contribution to society in the first place, right? Now, the fourth reason why rehab is flawed is because the system inherently assumes that the inmates are mentally ill, which is extremely problematic because for the most part they're actually very much normal. And what it does is that, again, it ultimately destroys the justice system, because even before you're dealing with the criminal, your entire perception of him is extremely biased and skewed, where you go like, oh, you know what, he's mentally ill, so that's how I'm going to perceive all of the crimes that he has committed. What it does is it incentivizes you to ignore the actual crimes that he has committed and ignore the actual underlying causes that might be within his crime in the first place. Which naturally brings me to the last and fifth reason for why the sole system of rehab is flawed. You see, rehab is not based on an empirical knowledge of the causes of the crime that the person committed, right? If a person has committed any such crime like murder, rehab does not account for what caused him to do that. Rehab doesn't account for what led him to commit those crimes. Therefore, we realize that it is a completely unjust and unfair mode to implement in the criminal system and the justice system in the first place. Now on to my second line of argument, which is something that my second speaker will also be further expounding upon. You see, what is the result? What is the result of keeping rehab as the sole means of release in our justice system, and how it further leads to the deterioration of the society and actually further leads to more criminal activity? Here's the thing, right? Rehab as a method is for the most part very much subjective, and it is a system that is fairly manipulatable and also a system that doesn't completely get to the roots of what led you to commit these acts in the first place, right? Let's take tertiary education as an example. Even if you go through that entire phase and complete it entirely, there is no guarantee that you have ultimately fixed all of the flaws that lie within you and that you have ultimately gotten to the root of what caused you to take this in the first place. Now, before I link that to how it further incentivizes more criminal activity in these deteriorated society, yes.
So, if rehabilitation does not ensure that a person emerges a better human being, how does staying in jail unnecessarily prove that?
You see, because your whole point is that, oh, you know what, the only thing that should allow an inmate to be released is to actually complete a given time period of education and rehabilitation, and that's going to be enough to solve the whole problem. Whereas actually staying in jail doesn't give you one option, which is what you're doing in your model. It gives you multiple options for fixing your flaws and for actually coming out as a better person and someone who has ultimately realized the flaws and what he has to do for society as a whole, right? Like, just to give you a single example, simply taking part in meditation and religious affiliation program or simply committing to a program of social service actually does far better for you than solely keeping rehab as a means of release, right? So finally, what has opening opposition over here proven to you in this first speech so far? 5 reasons for why rehab is so flawed as being the sole means of release, and secondly, which will be further expounded upon in the next speech, why continuing to keep rehab as the sole means of release is so dangerous for society and ultimately contributes to further criminal activity because it is so manipulatable and flawed. We are very proud to oppose.
Today we had an opening opposition which still hasn't refuted how jail makes you a hardened criminal, which hadn't given a good analysis, adequate analysis of why this motion, why this policy is wrong and how it is harmful, right? So I'll move on to the refutations first of all. And they came up over here and had a contradiction in their case. They kept talking about how, you have different programs like, there's religion. First of all, we don't know why they're bringing religion. There are atheists over there. The atheists are also criminals. There are different people of different religions. I don't know why they're bringing that in. But even if there are different religious programs or, other programs, that is rehab, just for your information. They were like, you can find, they are there in jail, and that is rehab, and you're saying that that is good. So basically, you're conceding to our case. And at the second time, they're like, rehab is not good, so they have a contradiction. They are confused over here. Second of all, they come over here and talk about, how these people, even after rehab, all of their flaws are not corrected, and hence they're not a perfect person. But at the end of the day, who is a perfect person, ladies and gentlemen? Are we perfect? Please sit down. So you see, first of all, they become better versions of themselves. Obviously, rehab helps, and it's a fact because we have seen over studies that it does help, right? But second of all, again, how are we perfect? I'm sure every one of us over here has once in our life done something wrong that we are guilty about, because nobody is perfect. Nobody exists who has no flaws. And please sit down. So hence these people cannot be, unflawed at all, but they do become better versions of themselves, right? They also talk about how, these people are thought to be mentally ill, and hence this rehab won't work. First of all, they make it seem like to be mentally ill is something really wrong, and mental illness is something that's terrible, which is not okay, because mental illness exists, and it shouldn't be a taboo. And second of all, these people are troubled in some ways. Why? Because they committed a crime, and hence they are getting rehab, and they talk about why they committed a certain crime that they did commit. So I don't think there's anything wrong in that. They also had this very interesting argument about how, these therapists are already biased, and hence, this rehab is totally, it won't work. But this is their profession. If these therapists were biased, they wouldn't be therapists, because a therapist, he or she became a therapist after a lot of study. They didn't just become a therapist. And hence, this therapist is not biased against anybody, and they're giving them rehab to make them better people. assumption on their part. They also talk about how, these people have committed heinous crimes and they deserve to rot in jail. First of all, the extent of crime, your time in jail is evaluated after your extent of crime. And second of all, these people don't become better people overnight, and hence this rehab isn't, we're not saying we'll give them rehab for a day and then release them. This, when they become better versions of themselves, that may take years and years, then they will be released. And hence when they come over here and talk about, they deserve to rot in jail, they make it seem like we will release them overnight, which won't happen. Hence the rehab works over time, over a long period of time. Now moving on to my first line of argument, I will talk about the impact of rehabilitation on the inmate and the society. So the entire purpose of having laws in place, having a government, setting up the way the world should work, is to end human suffering, right? So now my first speaker already explained to you what the exact purpose of jail time is, and how rehab is the main purpose of staying is in jail, right? So I will tell you the impact of rehab. Now rehab helps these troubled people to get back on track, right? To talk about their worries, to sort themselves out, to find better versions of themselves, right? When they receive this rehab, they become better versions of themselves and minimize the troubled personality that they have, right? So when they then eliminate the part of themselves that's troubled and then try to become better, and then this turns them and shapes them into a person who will most likely be able to fit into the society. And so when this person is released, he will be happy. And we over here at Team Open Government are for maximizing happiness. This person will be able to integrate back into society. This person will be able to fit into society and live and have a second chance at life, right? So please sit down. So basically, when he gets a second chance to live, he will rectify himself, and he or she will try to become a better person, right? After receiving rehab, when they go back into the society, they will be able to do things that they couldn't have done before. Just because they didn't receive help, just because they didn't get their basic the help that they needed to sort themselves out. Not only is this person now living off better, but the people in the society are better off as well. There will be less that is wrong in the society. These people are less likely to do harm now, right? So if they're less likely to do harm, what will happen is that the amount of whatever is wrong in the society, the percentage of that will be decreased, and these people and when the percentage of crimes is decreased, and it historically has decreased. And my first speaker did give you an example of the Justice Act in the USA, where what they did was they spent a lot of money on rehab, and as a result, we saw its facts that the crimes in that country reduced to a major amount and had a major impact. So we have seen historically that it has helped the society and those people. Please sit down, sir. So now there are less people committing crimes, less people will be harmed, right? And so less people will do the harm as well. These people will be able to fit in better, and they will be able to run the country in a much more peaceful manner, and the overall percentage has decreased, like I already told you. Moving on to my second line of argument, how the resources can be better allocated. So now the purpose of putting people in jail has already been fulfilled. Like my first speaker has already proven to you that they are already better people, and the purpose of their jail time is already completed. So now we have already proven to you that. So now they've paid for their crimes, and it is inefficient to put them in jail for no good reason, right? So now we have established that there is no need for them to be in jail. So if these people continue to live in prison even after rehab, they're obviously using some resources and some finances which are obviously spent on them for food, for living expenses, cleanliness, so many other things that go into that, right? Different programs as well, different rehab programs even. So we think that when there is no absolute need for these prisoners to stay in the prison, this money is not being well used. Why? Because there are a lot of people in the world who are suffering, right? So hence these finances can be better allocated in the society. And Team OG stands with maximizing happiness and reducing the human suffering, right? When these resources are used to help the underprivileged and the poor, the society is better off helping these people, saving their lives, and providing them with their basic needs. What do you think is better? A society where criminals who have received rehab live in a prison and underprivileged suffer and die, or a world where we maximize happiness? So because we have the moral high ground, we believe that OG has taken this away. Thank you.
Alright, I'm going to start now. Is that fine? Alright, let's understand what the proposition has brought. The proposition has brought a case where they try to prove to you rehab is good. We can take down their whole case by just conceding to the fact that rehab is good. We concede to the fact that rehab is good. We don't deny that. We just tell you that rehab exists in the real world, in the status quo, and we have no problem with that. We have a problem with it being the sole source of people getting out of jail. Why? I'm going to prove to you in my positive case why it's flawed in its very nature, the rehabilitation assessment system, and why we believe that we can already prove to you on the basis of the fact on how parole currently works and how biases play into that, right? And first of all, let's take their arguments, right? They started with, we didn't prove to them how jail time makes hardened criminals. Tell us this: when a person is not able to prove to you sufficiently with sufficient evidence that he is rehabilitated, he is going to stay there indefinitely, and we believe that is unjust. If a person has just stolen a car and he is staying there for like 10 years just because he stole a car, that is, I mean, relative to the nature of the crime, he is staying relatively long, and we believe that is inherently unfair because he was simply not able to prove that he was rehabilitated, and we believe that's an inherent flaw in their case that they have not defended yet. Secondly, they said that no one is perfect, so it's like rehabilitation works to a certain degree, and if they, to a certain degree, become better citizens, we should allow them to. Let me ask you this, right? How? What's the metric on which you're basing this, right? Or how do you justify? How do you make sure what the degree is to understand that at this point the person has become a normal citizen who is allowed to go out into the society? We believe that was not very clearly distincted. Now, since we've shown to you that the proposition case is completely irrelevant on the basis that they've solely tried to prove to you how rehab is good, and we simply concede to that because rehab, we don't have a problem with rehab. Now let me move on to my positive case, in which I'm going to prove to you how there are very many problems with their case, and there will be integrated departments for the rest of their case, right? First of all, let's understand why we don't want this. These psychological evaluations that after rehab that allow the justice system to know how eligible they are to be released. These inmates are psychological evaluations, right? Essentially, that's how you assess their rehabilitation, psychological evaluations. And when by their very nature, psychological evaluations are subjective. A psychologist is going to do that, and psychologists, being human, have their inherent biases, and we believe that those inherent biases play into their judgment of that criminal. And we're going to prove to you that that also happens in parole cases, right? How does that happen in parole cases? We see in the real world when a person is labeled as a criminal and he is a proven criminal, people are more likely to be biased against him because of their inherent need to feel good about themselves in serving justice. And we believe that on that very basis, they are going to be inherently biased against the idea of releasing a criminal into the world. And we believe that is the fundamental bias that plays into these kinds of evaluations, which are going to affect these evaluations. And I'm going to prove to you the three stakeholders that exist in this, right? First of all, there are small offenders, right? Who did small crimes that are like a week of jail time or a month of jail time, those kinds of offenses, right? And the other are big offenses like killing, killing, serial killing, or those kinds of really severe crimes, right? We believe that first off, when there are small criminals who go to jail for a certain crime and they are not able to prove to you that they are sufficiently rehabilitated, they would stay there indefinitely, regardless of how small the crime was, simply on the basis that the rehabilitation system was not sufficient enough to for them to be exonerated on the basis of how good they are able to represent themselves as just citizens of the society. We believe that that is very wrong. Yes, ma'am.
How do you justify the splendid consequences of the Justice Reinvestment Act and where the prisoners were released on the sole rehab treatment?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
How do you justify the consequences of the Justice Reinvestment Act where the prisoners were released on the sole rehab treatment?
Right. I didn't understand that. I'm going to move on. Sorry. Let's understand how the large offenders are affected by this, right? Let's understand this. The people who are offenders of larger crimes, right? Like killers or serial killers. These are very dangerous people, right? Like people like let's take for example Ted Bundy or Ed Kemper, right? These people have lived in the society committing heinous crimes while being in the society, living as normal citizens of the society. They were so good at lying to the people that they did all these crimes and were still able to live in the society as normal individuals. We believe that when those people go to jail and are sitting next to a psychologist, they would simply be able to prove to that person that they are rehabilitated. When that person who is that much good at lying, that he was a part of society, being normal while committing such crimes, we believe that it won't be hard for them to manipulate this type of psychological evaluation which assesses their rehabilitation. We believe that when that happens, those kinds of criminals are more likely to go free, and we believe that is very dangerous because in their case, that is the only way. So they are more likely to go free. But in our case, they have life sentences. There is a possibility of parole, but since there is life sentence, there is a possibility that they would be prevented from going out by simply manipulating the system, right? So we believe that how do we benefit the society at large by doing this, right? We have shown to you that the small offenders are reliably let go of jail time after they serve sufficient time, and the large offenders stay there due to the life sentences that are able to be implemented in our case, right? So how does society change or stay the same essentially in our case, right? The large criminals do not get out. There is exponentially lesser possibility of them getting out. Why? Because there is life sentences and they cannot simply manipulate the parole system to get out, because that is the only system. In their case, they fail to do that. Secondly, the smaller offenses, which, let me clarify, need not have longer jail times, could possibly have longer jail times in their case if the person is not able to prove to you that he's not a serious danger to society. And when that happens, that person who was actually innocent and didn't commit a serious crime has the possibility of becoming an actual hardened criminal, which they posed as a question to our case. We believe that posed a bigger question on their case, and we believe we have won this debate on the basis of what we've proven to you. Thank you.